All right, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. My name is Kevin Tu, and I'm excited to introduce our next session and bring to stage Dr. Lingjia Tang. Lingjia is the co-founder of a conversational AI startup called Clink, and also serves as a professor of computer science at the University of Michigan, where her research focuses on large-scale production infrastructure for intelligent applications. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lingjia for the past couple of years, and will hand it over to her to discuss using AI to bring a human touch to automation in business.
Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. Let me share my screen with my slides. Actually, this one, share. The presentation mode. All right. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you, Kevin, again for the introduction. I'm really excited to talk about the topic today, how conversational AI can change the world, especially in the post-COVID world. I'm going to start this talk by asking you guys a question. Might be a little bit of a trick question. What do you guys think Australian police force and the Japanese fishing company have in common? To answer these questions, I want to take you back to 5 years ago, a journey that we actually embarked on. 5 years ago, my colleague and I open sourced the software we call Sirius. So it's an open source software that allows people to be able to build a voice-enabled virtual assistant for their own domain. We put it on the GitHub for people to use, and it started to get tens of thousands of downloads in the first month. And we started to get phone calls from a lot of actually companies, such as Wells Fargo and Ford, and to ask us to help them to build domain-specific voice-enabled virtual assistants. And among all the phone calls and emails we received, here are the two very interesting ones. And you guessed it, we got a call from Australian police force, and we got a call from a Japanese fishing company. It turns out that they both want to talk to their computers. So the Australian police force called us and said they want to be able to have a virtual assistant voice-enabled in their cars. So when they are chasing bad guys, they could talk to a virtual assistant and ask questions such as, can you run the license number of 123456? Can you put the criminal record of the person up for me? For the Japanese fishing company, they wanted to be able to have a virtual assistant that they could talk to when they're out fishing. So they could ask questions, what kind of fish is this? What are the regulations for this type of fish? Am I allowed to keep it at this size? And can you do the inventory for me? So we got very excited about, the market, actually the people's demand for talking to their computers and interacting with technology in this way. And if you really think back, right, I think humans have been romanticizing about talking to technology and talking to their computers for a really long time, from the murderous computer back in 1960s, no spoiler alert, to this is actually a screenshot of a recent movie called Her, where the main character is talking to his OS, who is a virtual assistant that's talking back, and they form the relationship and a friendship. That really actually shows, I think, people's desire to talk to computers and interact with technology in a natural way. But back to the reality, right? If we trust Google to sort of represent what people think, or people's opinion, here's a Google results that when you actually type in Alexa, Google Assist, and Siri, right? So you could see that people's feeling and people's sentiment towards the current offering for virtual assistant is very far from what we think we should be or where we think we should go, right? And no offense to any of those assistants, I have really great colleagues and friends working in those actually offerings and those companies on those problems. But is this the best we could do as a community? I think the scientific breakthrough are already here for us to build human in the room conversation experience with caveats, and we could do it right now. And I'm just going to take you through why I think right now is the time. And I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes going through sort of, the trends in computer science in the last few decades. Bear with me if you actually are experts in this area. So trend number one, big data, right? I don't have to spend much time talking about big data. Everybody knows about it. We have tons of data. If you look at Turing Award, the Nobel Prize in Computer Science, as an indication of what we think the major breakthrough in the last couple of decades. Turing Award in 2014, it was awarded to Michael Stonebreaker, MIT faculty member and a Michigan alum, so go blue, for database system, which is one of the pioneer system for enabling big data. Trend number two is compute. In 2017, Turing Award was awarded to Hennessy and Patterson, who are pioneers for computer processor design. If you think about processor design, we have been enjoying last couple of golden age decades of major sort of compute power increase, and in the last couple of years, or a decade, we realized that deep learning, this kind of algorithm, the matrix multiplication and computation, we could run those really fast on GPUs, and then we realized we could do very much specialized hardware for those kind of computation. Now we're really enjoying the tremendous amount of processing power that we could actually have on those specialized hardware, right? And trend number three, everybody actually heard about this, which is sort of the deep learning on deep neural networks breakthrough from an algorithm perspective. And Turing Award winner in 2018 are the pioneers for those algorithms and breakthrough for those algorithms. And none of this trend is sort of isolated. Actually, if you put all those three trends together, sort of in the same place, those ideas collision happened. And I think they propel each other. The reason we're actually enjoying great AI age nowadays is really because we have tons of data that's enabled by our system, tons of processing power enabled by our designs, and the breakthrough on the algorithm side. So all three things come together really is now why we actually have a lot of natural language understanding, a lot of dialogue management system powered by those trends, being able to actually handle complete conversation. That's why I believe that we actually at this point where we could have human in the room experience. Okay, and when I say human in the room experience, and that's you can handle messy language, people can talk in slangs, they could use slangs, you could actually have multi-turn conversation. Of course, caveats is if this is in more sort of domain specific, more task-oriented conversation, we still don't do small talk that well, and some of other conversations. But if you really want to finish a task and with a specific domain, we could do really, really well, right? And from an industry perspective, when I'm hearing in this sort of 5-year startup experience, is industry want to either use this conversational AI experience to improve customer service, improve customer engagement with their digital experience, right? So they're driving costs down, they're driving sort of experience up. And I think one of the key is to be able to have a really smooth and really sort of delightful conversation experience where you feel that the system really understands this human in the room conversation, right? And translate to business metrics, that means high containment rate, meaning that, when customers are interacting with those kind of AI agent, the percentage of time that AI can accomplish those tasks without going to a human agent, right? So if you call a call center and you immediately say, representative of 0, then you basically just default to the human agent, and that's not ideal. And the key to drive that is to actually have good conversation experience. And I just want to play a quick video. It's just 1 minute to sort of demonstrate sort of what we see. This may not be the best video to show, but I just want to use it as an illustration of sort of human in the room that we try to actually get to.
How do I even sort these?
Are you still working on the budget?
Yeah, I want to see where we can save some money for our trip, but I'm having trouble sorting through all these expenses in Excel.
You know there's an easier way, right? Outside of bills, I'm trying to figure out where we spent most of our money in the last 6 months. I think it was food. How much did we spend on restaurants?
You spent $5,327 on food and drink in the last 6 months.
Okay, and we spent a lot of money going to football games in Ann Arbor on the weekends. What does that look like?
In the last 6 months, you've spent $2,341 in Ann Arbor.
Wow, looks like we could just cut back on restaurants and tailgating.
Wow, I wish I'd known about Feeny an hour ago.
You're welcome.
All right, so that's just an example of, we want to be able to handle messy language. That might not be the best example to show conversation, and maybe we could share some of the videos later. But this is basically sort of illustration that we want people to feel that they'll be able to talk to this agent in a very natural way, and I think that's a key to drive experience. Of course, a lot of people working on key innovations on the core tech to provide this kind of natural language understanding. And also as dialogue management, I listed some of the key innovations here. There's still actually continuous stream of innovation coming out of the community, as well as startups for this kind of innovations. I listed two that I've been actually particularly interested in terms of relationship extraction of utterances, identify multiple intents to actually segment utterances, that all those pieces come together for us to build a really good system to understand that. But I want to mention that that's really just, a small piece of the big puzzle, right? It's a very, very important piece. You need the technologies, the AI technology for you to really to build that kind of experience. But if you think about in the beginning of the talk, I want to be able to enable Australia's police force, and I want to be able to enable Japanese fisherman company. I could build it for them, and I could have a bunch of AI engineers. I trained for PhD, get trained for master degree, and build for them. But that doesn't scale, right? Really, what we want to do is increase the accessibility of the AI techniques. So how do we enable, everyone build it, every developer to be able to build it? And how do we actually essentially democratize AI techniques, right? So industry need for this technique, of course, I think we get to the human in the room experience with a science breakthrough on the AI perspective, but here are a few puzzles we need to solve. One is how do we actually enable people to quickly build those conversational solutions? My experience with a lot of those actually big launches, it's actually years of actually struggle to building something out and rolling out to millions of users. And I think to do that, to solve this puzzle, how do we actually make average developer to build, or even maybe non-developer to be able to build? Of course, if you want to do it quickly, 70% time, we all know that we spend most of the time building AI, doing data collections and curations, right? So we really need tools to allow us to do this better. So better cross-sourcing. Cross-sourcing can give you tons of data. Cross-sourcing also it's a double-edged sword. How do you guarantee the quality? How do you actually see your questions better? Data synthesis, if you don't, if you want to rely on other ways to actually collect data, first by synthesis, how do you do that? How do you actually make sure you know the data quality? How do you know the diversity of data is there? How do you know that you have outlier of the data? So all those questions, we train data scientists to do those. It's sort of a dark art and sort of drain dance of how to actually massage your data and AI model to work. And that's not very scalable, right? We need to build more automated tools and semi-automated tools for developers to be able to do this. Now, on the QA side, we've been building software system for decades. We know how to do testing. We know how to do debugging. Do we have those techniques for AI? The answer is no, and it doesn't really actually generalize that way, right? So fundamentally, it's more statistical approach for AI model building. So even if you use F1 scores and other actually metrics, it doesn't directly translate to experience either. Testing is a challenge. Debugging is a much bigger challenge when you use sort of deep learning models. I mentioned about the ring dance. There's sort of a dark art of how you actually can massage your model better. The explainability of the models is also a big challenge. There's tons of innovation that's happening in the last probably 2-3 years on this topic, and I think we need to push that front even further. Now, continuous improvement means that when you actually deploy your model facing, let's say, pilots, thousands of users, eventually to millions of users, billions of users, how do you make sure that you continuously improve your model based on the data? What methods do you use? Completely not unsupervised, of course, have its challenge, but how do you actually make this easy to do for developers and companies? Now, I mentioned about the learning curves. So on top of all that, how do I then make sure that everyone or people who don't have many years of training be able to do this? How do I provide tools for people to do that? I think that's the even further tougher question that we need to answer if we want to actually get to the future. A third on top of that, I could personally build conversational solutions better. I can make a single developer to do this better. Then how do I enable even further collaborations, right? When I talk to, Wells Fargo and all those bigger institutions, they solve this problem similar as they solve software engineering problem, which is take my developer team of 30 people, let's build something. And it's a little bit difficult to think about collaboration on AI side at this point, beyond just basic software developer, right? We talk about DevOps, sort of process of CI/CD, and everybody understand the workflow for developers. How do we really do that for AI, right? How do you do source control, version control for models? How do I merge AI versions? How do I merge data? Like if we're working on classifiers together, you put some data in your class, I put some data in my class, all of a sudden it's a mess, right? So how do we actually enable a bigger team to work on a more complicated AI aspect? It's a challenge. On top of that, for industry standard, you want to make sure the model goes through audit, go through security, compliance, and all those issues, especially, my experience being working in financial industries is those are actually major sort of bottleneck for rolling out AI experience. And on top of that, the scalable system you need to build to be able to enable developers, enable performance, rolling out to millions of users with very high intensity sort of computation is never really a fun thing to manage. Then you have to actually have more smart systematic design for you to be able to scale performance. So all of those are sort of major puzzle pieces we have to put together to really push for not just conversational AI, but AI in general, but particularly I'm feeling the pain on those actually aspects from the industry. So key innovation beyond the core tech of NLP and dialogue management, we need better data curation, data collection. I mentioned about outlier labeling, consistent detection, just make the process, reduce the amount of time we need and actually increase the amount of sort of automatic insight we could actually provide for developers. From a testing perspective, how do you know you're really overfitting? Is there any way I could quickly actually provide those insights? I talked about debugging tools. I talked about set of conflict resolution for AI models, all those key innovations. So, I know the community is together making progress towards that, but I think a lot of the sort of academic perspective very much focused on the first core tech, less so on the other two pieces that's also very critical for moving the industry forward. So to talk about Clink a little bit, we actually live in production, and sort of my learning from live in production with me as a user is you do actually need very robust sort of AI perspective to achieve high containment rate and actually customer experience. We did actually enable with our platform people to build very quickly for their actually business needs. And I want to mention also that, sort of just in the takeaway aspect of the things that, conversational AI, I believe will change the world. I believe it will change the world now, and it's starting from now. And I think, in general, the customers want to be able to interact with technology in a very natural conversational way. The industry needs this, and the science is here to do it. And what I want to mention sort of post COVID-19 what is, after COVID situation, a lot of people working from home is really on the industry side pushing for digitalization of their experience, right? People don't want to go to bank branches anymore. They want to solve all problems on their phone, and they want to be able to have still high quality customer service, right? Through sort of maybe more virtual way of doing this. Call center is very difficult to manage. So all of a sudden industry need to provide services in a more digital, automated, but also humanized way. So I think that particular is actually a sort of motivator for pushing conversational AI even sort of more in the front for this industry revolution. The second takeaway point is experience matter. And I think that at the end of the day, you need to provide those good experience. You need to rely on cutting edge science because, if your AI can't answer a question, couldn't really understand a simple actually variation in utterances, your customer satisfaction is not going to be here and you're not going to be able to drive customer reduction well. And third bullet point where I spend a little bit time on is beyond the key AI algorithms. We as a community need to really push for innovation that could enable developers to build conversation experience quickly, right? That includes you automate data process as much as possible, enable collaboration across AI engineers and data scientists, really figure out the workflow, right? So beyond sort of ML ops side of things, how do we sort of improve the learning curve? And that goes beyond, just basic DevOps workflow to human-computer interaction of how you actually design those interactions to make sure that people can learn those techniques quickly, and system design. So it's a really cross-function effort beyond just AI to push forward this particular change. And with that, that's my talk, and ready to take questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Lingjia, for the talk. Really appreciate the insights. So I'm flipping over to the Q&A now, and there are a couple different topics and some interested participants for sure. So the first one, trying to pull a couple together, is can you share a bit about how do we tackle the challenges of developing chatbots or conversational AI for multiple languages? Is there translation necessary, or is it really just based on the data that is inputted into the models?
Right. I think one really good thing about data-driven approach, such as deep learning, is you do have the data-driven approach. So you don't have to, if you don't do a bottom-up model of building speech, a part of speech tagging and apostrophe and all that, you just basically use data science or data to really drive your intent or your dialogue management with a top-down approach. You bypass a lot of grammar understanding side of things that really actually accelerate the way we could actually understand different languages. So I think top-down data-based approach, it really is helpful for understanding different languages. On top of that, if you want to accelerate it, you could also put a translation layer on top of that gets you somewhere. You could translate to English and then use the things you already built and trans back. Sometimes it works, and so you rely on another translation built by probably deep learning approaches, and to do that. And then our experience, that could actually get us quite there already. But if you just completely based on data-driven, that's great too. But if you fall back to very sort of, I would say old school style of building grammar and parsing tree, then that's gonna actually really slow down, I would say, the developer process to do it for different languages.
Definitely. And when you think about implementing conversational AI across different industries, are there specific challenges that you run into because this technology can be applied so broadly? What are the different things you might run into in financial services versus healthcare versus the government? What are the different issues that you face?
Yeah, totally. Financial, that's a great question. I think in financial services versus healthcare, for example, healthcare, you have tons of terminologies that you have to learn. So typically in healthcare, in situation for insurance or actually, doctor actually dictating stuff, making notes, summarization side of things, you do actually run into a challenge where terminologies are very complicated in healthcare, right? You can't really completely just rely on cross-sourcing to get a lot of data. So, how do you actually combine that with experts and terminologies is a challenge for healthcare. If you want to put in a car, then all of a sudden your computation power is limited. So you can't really use all the fancy models that, we just put out there because we need, powerful GPUs and powerful actually, compute power and power, basically, essentially. So when you're in an embedded system, then you're limited. And how do you actually do that, right? If, in the QSR perspective, people talk even in a more messy way with a lot of noise and so on. So you have to handle that situation in an embedded system as well too. So depending on different deployments, people way of talking, how domain specific or broad their topics are, there's challenges both on the system side as well as the language understanding and conversation side.
Great. Well, Lingjia, we're at our time here, so thank you again for all of the insights you shared. I think I speak for all of us when we say that we're excited to see conversational AI technology continue to work its way into our everyday lives. I know that there were some Q&A topics we didn't have time for, so I encourage everyone to continue the conversation in Slack. And for everyone who tuned into the live stream, to join the next session, please follow the link below. See you there, and thank you again, Lingjia.